Welcome to Three, a part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm Gill with Joel Drucker and Amy Lundy, and it is another historic edition of Three, where Novak Djokovic wins his 23rd slam, beating Casper Ruud in the 2023 Roland Garros final in straight sets. Joel, I want to go to you to start. Historically, what did this occasion mean to you, this result?
This is just staggering. I mean, and I was there when Pete Sampras won his 14th in 2002, and that seems like long ago. And who was going to match that? And now he's won 23. And the other thing is, he looks pretty fresh. It doesn't seem the end of it. And halfway to the calendar slam, it's when Novak did that in 2016. It had been 24 years since a man had done it, since Jim Courier did it in 92. Then Novak does it again 5 years later in 21. Then he does it 2 years later in 23. The quality of his tennis, all these things, I mean, we'll crack into this more. It's just incredible. It's an incredible athletic achievement and obviously a unbelievable tennis achievement. 23 majors. It's the first time he's vaulted past Roger and Rafa on the tally.
When I first saw Tom Brady sitting in his box, I just could not believe the boldness. Like you're playing to break the record, right? You're playing on not your best surface in somebody else's house. And you have the chutzpah, fill in the word that I'm thinking of, to invite Tom Brady. Yeah, let's invite Tom Brady to this. And also have a number 23 Michael Jordan jacket pre-made for this occasion. And then you back it up and you do it in front of that. I just, you got to have a lot of confidence to pull that off, and he has it. And so massive respect. Like there's nobody like Novak Djokovic.
He has the records for being number one, most weeks at number one, most year-end number ones. The record now for the most major titles at a time where, and look, there have been so many twists and turns in this that nobody would have expected, but at a time where Rafa's status as a contender in the future is entirely up in the air and questionable, and Federer is retired. So it is a real stamp on Djokovic's legacy, I think, because I think the way that you've put it, Joel, in the past is objectively, one by one, the arguments for Nadal and Federer as better than Novak have dissipated, the objective arguments. And now the only record that I can think of that's significant is Jimmy Connor's 109 titles. There's no other records that I can think of, like major records that are yet to be surpassed. Am I missing any?
I was thinking about that. That is a pretty interesting set of what those different quantitative things are. And I think you're right so he's up to 94 now. So that's a question of 16 titles, but that's a different thing. And I think in a way, I'm not the only one to believe this. Maybe these absences Novak has had from slams and North American hardcore tennis have been a blessing, kept him fresh and allowed him to continue. Look, he's only won 2 tournaments this year. No big deal. Is that right? He's only won 2 tournaments this year. Yeah,
that's right.
And the other thing with Novak, I think the legacy, when we speak of Federer, Nadal, he spent so much of his career vying with those guys. So he's always had to keep upgrading. I think that's what's going to be his great legacy, is the quest. And the fact that he had to kind of stay in there with those. It's like having 2 older siblings, but they never leave the house. They never go off to college. You're still having to prove it to them. And he's still done that. And it's just incredible. Just incredible.
And credit Nadal. He had his finger on the tweet button, as soon as the last point was won, he congratulated Novak, and very classy message by Nadal. But let me remind you that we don't know what the future holds. It seems right now that Novak will be the favorite going into Wimbledon. I personally am very excited to see him vie for the calendar slam, but we don't know what the future holds for Nadal. And there could be one more twist and turn in the road. That's why they play the sports. That's why the guys lace up their shoes. So it'll be a fun summer watching to see what happens next.
But we're not going to see Nadal this summer. So it's going to see who some of the other contenders are, whether it's Kyrgios is making his way to grass. Who knows what Alcaraz has learned? Yeah, it's lots of things. I mean,
Nadal has not retired.
No, Nadal's not retired.
Right.
He'll be back in 24 probably.
Look,
this year.
I said last year, and I don't know if I said it after the US Open or if I said it earlier than that, but the main factor and this wasn't about Djokovic Alcaraz, this was at the time potentially about Nadal Alcaraz, but I said last year that Alcaraz and the ability to beat Alcaraz is going to be a real key moving forward in the slam race, because they're going to have to go through him. And Novak went through him, and that was crucial here. Now, yes, Wimbledon would have been the easier one and has been the easier one, which almost makes doing it here at Roland Garros even sweeter for him.
Yeah.
I have a question for you too. Oh, go ahead, Amy. You're about to say something?
No, I'm just putting some more light on myself. I look pretty dark. There.
Here's a question for you too. So Novak gets through the Alcaraz challenge. Was it more revealing that Novak did that with kind of the proving his own his physical, emotional fitness, and even that was the lesson to Alcaraz? Or would it have been more emphatic if Novak had beaten him in a long and tough 5-setter? Obviously, that would have been a more pleasing match to watch. But does Alcaraz, which is the bigger lesson learned? Alcaraz has some learning to do about management, about how he manages himself and his energy and all his other stuff. And was that more profound than if it had just been a tussle, a 6-4 in the 5th?
Go ahead, Gill.
Okay. So for me, just educationally, and when I think back about just learning how these things work in the sport, the way Novak won it was actually really, really eye-opening. Again, not as entertaining, but the fact is Alcaraz has been dynamite in finals throughout his career. His young career. He has a great record in finals. No moment has really ever seemed too big, with the exception of some, maybe the Roland Garros match against Zverev last year, and then the Wimbledon match against Sinner. He wasn't all that clutch, but then he wins the US Open. Point is, how overwhelmed he was by that moment and that occasion, the opponent, the pressure, all of those things. It was a real reminder about how if you haven't done that over and over again, it can completely take away everything that we think this sport is about when it comes to how fast do you move? How's your footwork? How's your forehand? How's your drop shot? How's your serve? No, it wasn't about that. It's, can you handle this arena? I mean, and Novak, one of, I think, the top 3 legacies of him is that nobody handles that arena better. Nobody is better on that stage. I haven't seen a tennis player handle pressure better than Novak Djokovic in my life. And, this final, especially the first set, we can talk more about, was another example of that. What do you think, Amy?
I think it was more profound that he won the way he did, although I leave open the possibility that in the very near future, Alcaraz could get it together and they could engage in a tussle, a very close match in which Novak could win all the crucial points and rise to the occasion and win in 5 sets. Like that, I could definitely see that happening. So he would have both under his belt. But I think it's a very simple analogy, and it's been used a million times in sports. But a commenter on our last show said that Alcaraz was playing a sprint when he should have been playing a marathon, or he was prepared for a sprint and he should have been prepared for a marathon. Well, you know what? Ask any sprinter to go out and run a marathon, it's not that easy. Like, you got to change your mentality. You got to change your whole approach, the way you train, everything. So we'll see. Novak is prepared for just about anything you throw at him, sprint, marathon, or relay, anything in between. We'll see if Alcaraz or some other player can rise to the occasion.
Yeah, I like that. So I think what we learned here is that the 5-set win, if that had happened, would reveal this much of a gap. Yeah, the older player scraped one out, but this was a little bit more to the operating system, to something deeper, like you said, maybe more profound, but still. And I like that. I got it, of course. And we still, I want to see that epic Alcaraz Djokovic match, because that was a thing that was frustrating about this Roland Garros. We didn't quite get to see. We got like a flavor of it, and then it kind of ended.
Yeah, it really highlighted the mental, I think, the way the Alcaraz match went down. Whereas I think if it went 5 sets, it would have highlighted a lot of other things that I guess we think about a lot more, and maybe we shouldn't. Because and I know I'm saying mental, meanwhile it's cramps, which sounds physical, but it's just not the reality of the situation that Alcaraz can't run that much or he's going to cramp. He can run that much. He was too stressed, and that made him cramp. And that's what he said. And that's the only thing that makes sense, because we've seen him run for 5 hours and be fine.
Well, so does Novak have the meeting, and Novak said, okay, here, let me expose you to the positive aspects of meditation and other such practices.
Yeah. How can you calm down? Part of it is just experience, though. Good segue. This was Ruud's 3rd major final, and it was really his 6th big final, if you include ATP year-end championships and Miami. I think he played maybe the best big match of his career in a straight set loss.
Yeah, I think, well, I haven't watched lots and lots of his matches, but having seen it, this was a really good effort, and the start was really good. And we talked about finding another way to lose. And I think what he did, he was swinging aggressively and not just being passive, and looking to use his forehand and moving and pushing Novak, and being aware that maybe Novak himself was a little tight. So much of this life and sport is about the language you have in your head, and empathy and understanding the other person's language, and putting some ideas in mind. And it was a very impressive opening set from Ruud until then it was 6-all. And then
here's my notes from Ruud. Like I said in the pregame, Ruud cheating to the forehand on his recovery position. Novak not only took advantage of that with a backhand down the line, but a runaround forehand inside in. So that was a liability for Ruud. I put Ruud messing around with his return position, did not work. Ruud played well in the front court, didn't do it enough. We had, just so our viewers and listeners know, Gill, Joel, and I have had a long, extended discussion about success percentages in the front of the court versus the baseline. And I won't bore you with the ins and outs, because we can do that on another show. But both guys did over 70% success rate at the net. I just don't think Ruud did it enough. I know it's extremely hard to, quote unquote, rush the net with Novak's depth, but I saw many points where there were opportunities for him to come forward, and he chose to stay at the baseline.
Yeah, on Novak again, that you could see his pace picking up once he got back on serve in that first set to 4-all, and then into the tiebreak. And as per usual, he was just so buttoned up in the tiebreak, and it was it's that whole blend of offense, defense, awareness. It's quite impressive, and the whole world kind of knew that was going to happen once it got to 6-all. And you see it happen, though. It's a real art form. It's a real form of his genius.
I was just blown away by the physicality in that tiebreak. The first 3 points were brutal. Novak did so much running in the first 3 points, and it's one thing. I'm pretty sure the game leading into the tiebreak wasn't all that physical. So it's one thing to play that first point, which was long, and Novak found this unbelievable forehand down the line winner. It's another thing to play the next point long And the point after, long. And not just middle of the court, we're trading ground strokes from stationary positions long. It's really Djokovic doing a ton of running and long. And still, the refusal to miss. No shortcuts, no trigger pulls. Was he tired? Yeah, he was tired. You could hear it in his grunt. You could hear it. You could see his shoulders moving up and down at an extreme level. But he was not going to take the easy way out. Willingness to suffer, to me, big key in the first set tiebreak, because there was tension. There were nerves throughout the first set for Novak.
Well, when you see two of those overheads missed on an overcast day, that he missed badly in the first set, and then Ruud missed one too, and it's just kind of staggering to me to see tennis players this skilled miss overheads. And yeah, Novak was tight, and yet then in the tiebreak he kind of like fought through it. There's your suffering and working through things. It's just very impressive. And those points, that opening points of the tiebreak, those were hard.
That doesn't get tight though, right? Like, you're never too tight to run. You might be too tight to hit a great forehand down the line into the corner.
Right.
But you're never too tight to run.
You're not too tight to run, but you can be too tight to hit to these spots. And you see the accuracy. And even some of the times when Ruud came to net, you could, comes to net to Novak's backhand, and Novak with the cross-court pass, getting it over there, and not always a winner, but just making Ruud then play the volley. I mean, that's a great play on clay, is to pass cross-court and then make the person try to do something with the volley, because you'll probably pass them on the next one. I call it the two-step tango.
I'd like to point out, since we're on this topic of running and his endurance and some of these points, I'd like to point out that I think Novak brilliantly took a page from Rafael Nadal to win this match, and probably the previous one. I wrote a piece a couple of years ago on Nadal, and I called it his bag of tricks. Notice I didn't say dirty tricks, because everything is within the rules. But he takes a lot of time between points, Nadal does. He manages his time very well. He frustrates others, but he doesn't break the rules. He plays within the rules. And that's always the way that he has managed things, especially at Roland Garros. Well, what did we see Novak do today? He took a lot of time between points, and the chair umpire did not call him out or warn him until very late in the match. It was all within the rules. And you know what? It was really smart. And I think he got it from Rafa. He also took a lot of time when he missed his first serve to his second serve, and there is no serve clock there. I thought that was brilliant. And that's where he's like doing a little mini meditation in between. And that's, something that these younger players are going to have to learn, because he managed his energy brilliantly.
That's a great point. And he talked in his speech about how he tortured his team. So it leads me to wonder, of course, what we talk about, the impregnable qualities of his fitness and all that, again, to Tom Brady and these other kind of masters of longevity who we've learned a lot more about in the last 10 years, because prior to that wasn't happening. And yet at the same time, you wonder what goes on in that training, that recovery, because, he's not immortal. He's not immortal, Novak. He's not a machine. So the ways he's had to manage himself and his energy and his physicality and his stretching. So it'd be interesting to see how that continues to roll out on through the rest of the year.
Yeah, he also lobbied chair umpire Damien Dumassois to start the clock later on the change of ends. And sometimes with a subjective thing like that, like when do you start the clock, complaining is a good idea if you want an adjustment there. So I thought that, I also noticed that, and that was, I'm sure, just a tactic. Let's see if we can get some more time on the change of ends. Although in fairness, a lot of players have felt that at Roland Garros there isn't quite enough time on the changeovers. Second and third set, I thought it was less about physicality. And I think we saw kind of the Djokovic 2.0, where he's developed a lot of serve plus one proficiency later on. And the first serve and the forehand was dominant. A lot of short point dominance here. But I think particularly against Ruud, the forehand sticks out, because there were points in the match where I'm looking at this Djokovic-Ruud matchup, in the second and the third, and I'm thinking, whose forehand is actually doing better right now? Whose forehand is bigger?
We talked about this during Australia. Remember, we noticed Amy, you were talking about how Novak had gotten stronger and was hitting the ball harder in Australia. And then you could see after he got through that hurdle of the first set, Djokovic thought, all right, yeah, whose forehand is stronger? And you could see maybe some of Ruud's mind and legs starting to weary a little bit. I think some of Ruud's depth and precision was less as we got into the second and early third set. So Novak said, yeah, here's my forehand. Welcome to it. And my backhand's way better. I mean, so the Novak's that cross-court backhand is just unbelievable. Not that it's hitting not that it's hitting winners all the time as much as just into the corner. I mean, it's an interesting thing. Like, let's say the Novak cross-court backhand, the Rafa cross-court forehand. I mean, two of the greatest shots ever.
I thought you're right, Gill and Joel. I thought Novak did a good job with the +1 forehand in particular, playing off really good serving. Normally it's sort of a red flag for me when a player is putting well over 70% first serves in, because then I wonder, well, are you going enough on your first serve? But Novak has proven a lot recently that he's an exception to that. And if he does what I call, it's almost like a double-double in basketball. If he does the double 70s, over 70%, well over 70% first serve in, and then well over 70% first serve points won, then that's a great sign for him. And that's what it was today.
Yeah. What is it? Difference in win on first serve percentage. It ended up being more than 20. Djokovic at 80% on clay. It's absolutely phenomenal. And Ruud being at 57%. Novak
and Ruud's, I think his first serve in was pretty low as well. At one point it was in the 50s.
Yeah, it ended up at 64%. I don't know if he made up a lot of ground in set 3. He did actually, 82% in the third set, where Ruud was holding pretty comfortably until 5-all.
Well, I suspect then Ruud had a philosophical talk with himself at the end of the second set. It's like, quit forcing it. I mean, if you're getting 82% in a set, you're making a strategic decision about deployment.
Mm-hmm.
I believe.
Yeah,
so,
but
I got to get this sucker in and let's go to work here, because the other way is not working.
It was damaging, though. I mean, statistically, it wasn't damaging enough. I thought Djokovic was actually very aggressive on the first serve return throughout the third set. He got so much looser and just willing to just swing out, hit out, especially in return or on return. I think he figured, like, maybe I'll put together a game where I make, 4 or 5 great returns and it'll give me that easy break of serve. So that was bothersome for Ruud. You might be right, Joel, that Casper was taking a little bit off the first serve in the third set. Do you know where I see a huge technical gap here that really stands out to me?
Where?
Defending the backhand. Ruud slices when he's rushed or stretched on the backhand. We all know that Novak doesn't. He hits an open stance, drive backhand, and he gets speed on it, and he gets depth on it. It's a night and day difference.
Oh, well, that's exactly, you're spot on. Well, that's what you're talking about the forehand earlier. So Novak said, look, guess what? I'm going to match my forehand versus your strong forehand. And so there's not going to be as much of a gap, even though you have this forehand that's pretty darn good, Casper. But then the backhand, you're right, it's completely, and everybody knows that. Everybody knows that about the Ruud backhand, and the Novak backhand is one of the greatest ever. So that's why that whole thing, okay, cross court and defend the way Novak hits his backhand. I wonder when he's actually defending on it. I mean, he's in a deeper part of the court, and then if you hit it short, that's just not good math for Ruud backhand to backhand.
I thought Ruud looked really flummoxed on the backhand at times, not sure whether to hit slice or top it, shanking a few of them. They just get into a really good rally, and then out of nowhere, he'd make an error on the backhand. So, yeah, that's a liability for him. He's going to have to figure that one out.
Did we have that talk about Berrettini in the Wimbledon final a couple of years ago? It's the same thing. Yeah. So then So then Ruud's choice is, okay, I got to go redirect. I'm going to go down the line to Novak forehand. But if Novak is feeling on the forehand, he's going to send you running. He could send you running with a cross-court forehand. So it's a lot of, yeah, it's a tough set of geometry out there.
Yeah, Ruud's backhand is much better than Berrettini's, at least.
Right.
And I do think in the first set, he did a good job of taking it down the line, which was we identified that as a key before the match, that he needs to ask a little bit more of his backhand, and he can't just be predictable cross court. Amy, you pointed out earlier in the show that there was a lot of forehand inside in success by Djokovic. A lot of that came off of Ruud's cross court backhand.
Yeah. Matteo may have a worse backhand, but at least he took sets off of Novak.
True.
He did that. I think also,
so something's working somewhere in there.
Well, Berrettini, there's a and since that was Wimbledon in particular, there was a brazenness to Berrettini in that final that was exciting, that made that final come alive. And Ruud was on his way in the first set, but he couldn't quite get over it. Novak kind of clawed his way into the clay in a way that, Berrettini kind of put his way through that first set at Wimbledon 2 years ago.
Yeah, I like that word. Berrettini would always, in a lot of his matches, he goes on this big rush of energy, and the crowd is in it, and he's Ruud keeps it a lot more low key, and I think maybe he could benefit from coming out of his shell just a little bit. But again, I mean, it's tough. Joel, you said before when we were off air, what was Casper's biggest fault in his career so far in the major finals?
What I'm trying to remember what we said.
You said he keeps playing. He's played guys with like a combined.
This what to tell. Yeah, he's played guys. He's played Nadal and he's played Djokovic. So he played guys who've had a combined total of 45 majors. I guess only 44 going in, and then the other time he played Alcaraz. He didn't just play a rising star. He played the rising star. Maybe the fourth time the seas will part and he'll get someone. He'll play Rublev, and they can each go for their first.
Right.
Or Zverev going for in another final.
It's interesting. I don't know why I did this. I just looked up Djokovic and Berrettini because it was in my mind that they have played in slams, if not the slam final. But so they've played in recent years. They've played at the U.S. Open, at Wimbledon, and at the French. And each time it was 4 sets, and each time Matteo won a set 7-6. So it's almost like he got that one set that Casper did not get today. But then Novak just went from there.
He won the Wimbledon final. He won the first set in the tiebreak, right? But that's pretty good. He won a tiebreak versus Novak too.
Yeah, it's been one of my least favorite matchups in all of tennis. They've played the same exact match like 4 times now.
Yeah.
And by the fourth
time, I'm
time,
sorry. At the US Open, it was 7-5. He won the first set 7-5.
Okay.
When they played at the French back in 2021, he won the third set 7-6. So it's interesting. It was like the same kind of match, one really close set and then Novak dominating the other sets.
Amy, you don't need to remind me. I was courtside for the U.S. Open match, and I was like, oh my God, I've watched this match 3 times this year, and we're watching it again. Anyway,
also Gill, I think Berrettini kind of is a conflict for your airtight tennis sensibilities. His game, the holes in it, the ups and downs. I mean, Gill, we know Gill is a kind of a stay the course, Spanish raised player, so you're not going to see. You're not going to see Berrettini at the Sanchez Casal Academy, playing that way.
Yeah. There was a thing, though, that I guess we had seen in the Berrettini matches, and we did see in this Ruud match, which is that we've seen it throughout this tournament against Fucsovics, against Davidovich Fokina. When you play your best tennis for a while and you come out empty-handed, it's so hard to still believe that it's your match. And I thought the second set in particular, deflation from Ruud, no more nerves for Novak. That's a bad formula. It just tilted it even more.
Hey, at that sense, and this is where I buy into. I completely agree with the recreational to pro dynamic. It's just like them for us. You know, how many times you give all you can against a better player and you think you could make a go, and then you lose it 7-5, 7-6, and right. And it's just that slight little margin. The better player is now 7% ahead. You're 7% behind. And then the whole thing, you know, it gets late quickly.
And you start to have the thought, well, at least I didn't humiliate myself. And that's the worst thing you can start thinking, because then you've already like lost.
I've had that thought at 3-all. I've had that thought at 3-all. 3-all, I humiliate myself. Yeah.
Let's kind of go back to the Brady thing real quick, because I do think there is an interesting debate to be had. I've been kind of thinking about how Federer aged into his mid to late 30s, how we've seen Rafa age only a year older than Novak Djokovic, but also LeBron and Serena and Tom Brady. How can we compare and contrast Novak and what he's doing right now to those guys?
Sure.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that Brady played well into his 40s. I mean, it's almost like a little subtle signal. I may play into my 40s because look who I got in my box. I loved that, by the way. I just hats off. I cannot imagine having the guts to do that, but it's great. It was wonderful. And yeah, I think Novak, he's not really, other than the, occasional ticky-tack injuries, he's not really showing the wear and tear. When he was sprawled out on the clay at the end, and you could really see, his body against that clay, I was like, gosh, this guy is fit, really fit. So knock on wood, I don't really see any end in sight.
So compared to other athletes, yeah, it's interesting. Team sports a little different. I'm gonna say that too. Team sports are a little different. The team sports, you get breaks. The team sports, other guys have to take the shot. It's a little different. I'm not diminishing them at all, because they have their degrees of difficulty. And Tom Brady got tackled. That takes a lot on your body too. That's a physicality to that sport that's way different than tennis. So I don't know. It's kind of it's fun to think about. It's fun to see that soon enough we're going to say is 40 the new 28. I mean, when once upon a time, not too long ago, 30 was considered like 30. And then it gets 35. And yeah, it's like Novak, it's just amazing. Tom Brady. Yeah. What did he win his last Super Bowl? Was he 41 when he won that last Super Bowl?
I think he was 42, actually.
42.
Yeah. No, I think it was 43. I have it written down that it was 43.
43, and he won a Super Bowl.
It's insane. And I'm going to go into more depth on this on Monday Match Analysis, but I actually think Novak has a pretty good case for the most impressive of the unbelievable, graceful agers of the modern era. Just because he's the guy who I think we've seen the least change with, and also the guy whose physicality is most essential. So Brady, never a mobile quarterback, was getting rid of the ball faster than any other quarterback in the league in the latter half, so was really good at avoiding getting hit, and he was a total pocket passer. So it was really his mind and his arm and his ability to stay healthy, right? That those were the cornerstones of his game. And LeBron, you could see he's playing less minutes and he's not jumping as high, and he's not, he's settling for jump shots maybe a little more often and choosing his spots more often. Like, he's a different kind of player, still great, but different. Nadal, I think, different. Federer was pretty close to Novak in like kind of keeping the same thing going on. But I guess Roger just wasn't winning as much as Novak after 35. Not quite as much, right? He did win some, which was amazing.
Well, they felt like command performances, whereas Novak, it's like, Roger, great, one more, well done. And then he did one that, and then another. So they felt like bonus. Novaks feel like business, right? They just feel like, it's like, well done, Novak. Now you can go out. It's like, no, now you're going to go on to Wimbledon and be the favorite.
He's 11-2 in his 30s in major finals. He's more efficient in his 30s than he was in his 20s. I get it. The competition's different. I get it. He was still in development during some of those losses in major finals early on, where I think mentally maybe he just wasn't the same as he is now. But like, that's a legit stat that suggests that he's more efficient and he's better in his 30s.
He had
Yeah,
some.
I mean, Roger and Nadal aren't really there, so, or they haven't or had not been at the peak of their powers. So I think that speaks to the three of them, and what the three of them have meant to this era. But just in terms of, greatness and age, I was reminded of Phil Mickelson winning the PGA Championship at age 50, when it really came down to him and Brooks Koepka, the younger guy. And that was impressive. Obviously, Novak has far eclipsed Mickelson's accomplishments, just, by the fact that Mickelson has not won all the majors.
It's golf, though.
And huh?
It's golf.
Yeah, it's golf. It's golf. But you know what? You do lose your like the putting is something that really, really goes down typically. If you look at the stats, and I watch casually. I used to watch it a lot more. But it is highly unusual for someone to putt as well as he did in that tournament at his age.
The match closing stuff of earlier, I think earlier in his career, Novak had some issue closing out matches, and I think he addressed some of that during his time with Boris Becker. Remember, there's a period there he lost several slam finals. So there was Murray and Stan Wawrinka zoned on him in a couple of finals in 15 and 16. And you're right. And since his 30s, he's gotten a lot more buttoned up. The numbers bear it out. I also like, on the macro basis, bringing out my pom-pom cheerleader thing for tennis. I spent 50 years in America. This is how it works in America, defending tennis as a sport. Remember being like growing up and thinking, oh, I see, the guy who's 37 on the football team is more of an athlete than the guy who's number 5 on the tennis team. This gets to the role, and international listeners might be different, but I know in the US for a great many years, tennis has had to, we're a sport too. A common tennis thing you hear from a lot of older players and coaches. Oh, he's a good tennis player. He's not what you call a good athlete. I think, whoa, wait a second. So I just spent, you guys are younger than me, so you haven't had to deal with this as much. But so seeing Novak emphatically show the world, it's kind of like you're waving the flag for tennis. You're putting tennis in a big way at the athletic table that's different than when guys win 1 or 2 majors and tennis is incidentally. It's crossover significance for tennis, not always as sociology, but as athletic significance. And I enjoy seeing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, stylistically, what Novak is doing, and we saw it in the first set, like, he can still be a titan of physicality on a tennis court, which is crazy.
And it's not seen as like a requiem, one more for you, buddy. It's like, that's what's again, that's how some of these other triumphs are sometimes seen. Yeah, he got one more at this late stage. Again, it's like Novak, it's like he's not slowing much at all.
Right. And it wouldn't seem like that because you just look at the trajectory and the pace of things. Like, this post-2018 era has been just as fruitful as the pre-2018 era now.
Arguably more. Granted, of course, the point is, you're right. He, in the post-18, not as many. Well, he had some pretty darn good efforts against Federer and Nadal in there. That Australian Open final where he straight-setted Rafa. Of course, the great Wimbledon in 2019 where he comes back from championship point down twice. Yeah. Okay.
It's interesting to me that Novak had this documentary crew following him in 2021, and he got 3/4 of the way there, and he made it all the way to the final of that last one, thinking, okay, this will be documenting the calendar slam, and didn't quite get there. And to be honest, I'm not even sure what happened with the status of that documentary. But hopefully someone is following him now. And let's take another crack at it.
Well, and maybe you then reuse some of the footage and do this whole thing, and you start the new documentary at the end of the 21 documentary with the upsetting loss.
Yeah, let's talk about the calendar slam before we head into Wimbledon. Let's save that because it's back. It's back.
Plenty to say on that.
Exactly. Yep. Anything else on this, or have we covered it all?
A pat on the back to us for continuing to do this show and figuring out to do this show, even when some people said it was too late. I think we caught it at a pretty good time, and I'm really enjoying this run by Novak.
Absolutely. Good point. Love it. Great way to end it. That'll do it for this episode of 3. We're available on all podcast platforms. Appreciate it if you leave a review on Apple and Podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Hope you enjoyed. And we will see you next time on the next episode of 3.